question. Join me to experience how the regions of the Holy Land are part of the story. I'm Jack Beck, and this is the Holy Land. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. See if this is a good picture for you. Are you guys on vacation?
Yeah.
I love it. Do you know there's a Bible story here?
No.
1 Samuel 24, the story of David and Saul. So you remember when David was... You got it. So David's running away from Saul, and he's trying to find a place that he can hide out, and he comes here and gets tucked into a cave.
The cave.
Where's the cave?
Boom, you have it, the cave. First, I love to share my love for the land and the stories of this place. I've been coming to Israel for over 25 years, and I regularly run into people that are unaware of the Bible stories that have taken place all around them. So many locations throughout this land play an essential role in giving a richer understanding of the scriptures. Now, I'm a firm believer in taking nothing but photographs and leaving nothing but footprints. Well, almost nothing. Normally, wilderness is defined as a place devoid of people, but just look at all the tourists flocking to this desert oasis. You guys good for water?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah. I kicked my water bottle off the top of this ridge. It took off and it bounced a couple of times and went airborne and disappeared over. So I didn't hear a scream, so I'm really...
We'll keep an eye out.
It's easy to see why when you visit this gem of a location called En-Gedi on the western shore of the Dead Sea. During the time of King Saul and David, there were more wild goats in this valley than people, and most of their day was spent on the vertical cliffs. But they came down to drink water at the spring, and that is why this place was called En-Gedi, in Hebrew, Spring of the Wild Goats. The wilderness generally lacks water. En-Gedi is unique in this respect. David and his small band of men came here for water, and they also hid here among the caves of this natural fortress. The story of Saul and David is a Judean wilderness story, and my goodness, this ecosystem is hostile. I mean, really hostile to the human experience. There's an absence of food here. There's very, very little water in this place. Hey guys. It's a place where travel is incredibly difficult and risky because of falls off terrain and because of large predators. David wasn't out here. Hi guys. David wasn't out here because it was easy. David was out here in this place because it was hard. It was a place for him to escape from Saul as Saul was trying to take his life. Before the wilderness years, David was a shepherd boy tending his father's flock when God sent the prophet Samuel to anoint him, prophesying that he would one day be king. Imagine the dreams and aspirations this planted in David's mind. Later, while still a young shepherd, David brought food to Saul's army when the Israelites were threatened by the giant Philistine Goliath. David offered to fight him, proclaiming, "Who is this pagan Philistine anyway, that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God?" Through David, God brought the Israelites a great victory that day. Saul kept a jealous eye on David from that day forward, fearing he might lose his power and kingdom to this shepherd boy upstart. Now David had come out here to escape, to get away from Saul, but the Lord had the same plan for David in this ecosystem that he had for ancient Israel when they were wandering in the Sinai and wilderness of Zin. The truth of the matter is, when the Lord takes you into wilderness, you do not come out the same person. Exactly how did this barren wilderness shape David? Just before David won the battle and all Israel sang his praises, his brother Eliab reacted, "Why have you come down here? I know how conceited you are. You came down here to watch the battle." Perhaps Eliab spoke out of jealousy, thinking David was moved by his youthful presumption and dreams of leading Israel. But now, After almost 10 years as a fugitive, God was using the wilderness to shape him into the kind of leader who would be completely dependent on the Lord. 7 times, in 7 different places, Saul had attempted to take David's life. David correctly concluded there was only one step between him and death, and so he fled out into the folds of the Judean wilderness to hide. It worked until the day he ended up in the En-Gedi Spring area, deep in a cave with Saul's soldiers outside. It's at that moment that David does 2 things that seem totally irrational. You need to see it from the perspective of his soldiers. His soldiers would tuck back in the inner recesses of the cave, their backs up against the wall. Their only escape route was going through Saul's army where they were outnumbered 5-1. They did not want to be discovered. Their only safety is their secrecy, and so they're hiding in here. Suddenly they see David on the move. David, sword in hand, begins to move towards the mouth of the cave. He disappears out of sight. And then he comes back, and what he has in his hand is a piece of the royal garment of Saul. Saul must have been in the cave. His men were furious with him. They said, "Why didn't you take his life?" And then David does the second thing they can't understand. He walks towards the opening of the cave. He comes out again, and they can hear from the inside that he's calling out to Saul and shouting his direction, giving their position away. Everything that David was doing seemed totally irrational to them. David called out from the mouth of the cave to Saul, not to gloat, not to show off, but to declare his allegiance to Saul, even calling him the Lord's anointed. David had learned to trust the timing of God's future for him. Taking Saul's life was not the way for David to become king. Instead, David chose to surrender completely to God, no matter what the consequences might be. And what was Saul's response to David? "You are a better man than I am, for you have repaid me good for evil. And now I realize that you are surely going to be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will flourish under your rule." David's humble response was so powerful that even his enemy took notice and changed. David was closer than ever to being king of Israel, and the wilderness helped shape him to be the kind of leader the Lord needed him to be. It just reminds me of how seasons in the wilderness that I've lived through, or will live through, are defeatable, conquerable, are survivable, because I've seen David go out into that wilderness and be made better for it. That is the kind of vision I try to keep when I walk into a season of wilderness, believing that somehow the Lord will improve who I am on the backside, just like he did David.